Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Endow ladies. I am so happy today to be joined by Suzanne Wolfe, who is a wonderful, incredible woman. I have a girl crush on her. She's just so cool, which I think she knows about by now. But I'm so happy to talk to you, Suzanne, today because we're going to talk about your vocation as a writer and just kind of pick your brain about women, the vocation to writing, a woman of faith, spirituality, all these awesome things. So before we get into that, would you let our women know just a little briefly, who are you? So if for those who don't know who you are already.
Well, I'm Suzanne Wolfe and I publish under Suzanne M. Wolfe. I've written four published novels. The first, Unveiling. The second, The Confessions of X, which is the Confessions of St. Augustine's concubine. And then two historical fiction mysteries, A Murder by Any Name, and there it is, and the Course of All Treasons. And I'm currently writing the third in that series.
Do you have a title for that, Suzanne, for the third one?
The Witching Time.
The Witching Time. Okay.
Yes, and actually it's all about women and witches and poverty and social issues of vagrancy. So it's a very woman-oriented theme.
Oh, that sounds very Endow.
Yeah.
Very Endow. Well, I have this book that I haven't dived into yet, but this is going to be my winter reading, supposed to be my summer reading, A Murder by Any Name. But I also, I love Confessions of X and was actually at your book launch. So that was super, super fun.
Right.
I wanted to invite you today because I think we could learn a lot from, at Endow, our special sauces are, Catholic intellectual tradition and formation and community. But we also have a desire to lead with beauty in the way of beauty, and I think the written word is part of that conversation. So let's start off with, I'd love to know how you, because you're just this beautiful expression of the feminine genius. That's also one of our things at Endow is cultivating our unique feminine genius, because it's very clear in my mind that you know what you're about. And as a woman, as a Catholic, as a writer. So where was the intuition to that writing was going to be part of your personal vocation?
Well, it always starts with what you can do and what you love. And so as a child, I loved to read and learned to read at a very, very early age, actually because my grandfather would read me the Bible, a children's Bible, every night. And according to my mother, he began when I was an infant.
Oh, wow.
So I learned to read when I was 3 and just kept going, loved stories, was always really, really fascinated with stories. I was totally bad at math. In fact, I couldn't tell the time till I was 12. No, honestly. And, we'd be doing problems, the old problem, like, and this is in convent school in England, is like you have 50 miles to go and petrol costs, £2.51 a gallon and blah, blah, blah. And I'd be going, and my teacher would come and she'd say, how are you getting on? And I'd go, well, who's in the car? And what are they saying to each other? And why are they going 50? And she'd say, that's irrelevant. And I'd like, not to me, it isn't,
Yeah, I want to know the hearts and the stories and the relationships.
Yeah, why are they, and I'd be making up stories about these people in the car. And of course, I failed all my math exams.
Oh, I love that story. It's so good.
But that was...
It's who you were. It's who you are.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I kind of joke and say, well, if I hadn't started writing, if I hadn't studied literature at Oxford, there was nothing else I could do.
Yeah.
That was it.
Exactly. And that's actually quite liberating because the path in a way was clear, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yeah.
from a young age, it's such a huge gift. You're making me think of my own childhood of just because my artistic love is acting, and my mother would drop me off at school, and we had this dreadful uniforms and mean teachers, and the whole stereotypical thing. And I remember pretending to be an orphan, and you know, my mother was the nice lady that took me in, and the old lady that I lived with, because I shared a room with my grandmother for, you know, a long time, and she was just the sweet old lady that took me in and fed me sometimes, and I just, you know,
you had this whole
story, and just, you know, and then I'd pretend, you know, to come home, and my mom would give me the plate. I'm like, I don't know who this woman is, but I'm so grateful for this meal, and I'd take every bite like it was my first and last meal. I mean, it was the stories in my head, you know.
Yeah. You were sort of living it. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So I appreciate that. I think we could use more of the imagination. I think technology has robbed us of maybe even the habit of reading, and also just the cultivation of the imagination, which is so important. I mean, I love my fake worlds. You know, I love them.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, is that the fake world is sort of the real world. I mean, it's how we engage with the real world. And when we're children, of course, stories like, I mean, I was raised on, you know, traditional fairy tales and this kind of thing, you know, and even though it's a make-believe world, and the small child knows it's a make-believe world, but there are things that are very important. So for example, going off the path and getting lost in the wood, well, that's very Dante-esque, you know.
Yeah.
Wandering around in the wood, not being able to see the wood for the trees, that's like life.
Yes.
You know, and you come across bad people come across you.
Right.
You know, don't talk to strangers, Little Red Riding Hood,
yes.
You know, deception. And so this kind of reading an imaginative world, in one sense, on one level, it's a fake world, it's a fiction, but it's not a lie, it's the truth.
Yes, yeah. It's the avenue by which we encounter these real human grapplings.
Right, which is why, you know, the old chestnut is, when you're a writer, you write what you know.
Yeah.
And people tend to take that super literally, meaning, well, you know, I can't, you know, I've got to write about Seattle and, you know, white people.
Yeah.
You know, or just a woman, or you know, middle class, or whatever your background is. No. What we know is also what we feel, what we think, what we are from being human.
Yes.
And that's what we know.
Right.
And that's what we write about.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, there's so much I want to say about that, just because I like to write as well. But anyhow, what does it, okay, so and again, we haven't talked about this interview beforehand, so this is really spontaneous for me, but I don't see you as a Catholic writer. I see you as a writer who's
Catholic.
Yes. Am I correct? Number one.
You. Yeah.
That was me judging, and I you know, my gut is usually right, but I want to make sure, verify it, because it's totally fine if I was wrong, but I just want to get that out.
No, I am a writer. As we discussed, it simply seemed that's what emerged in me. That's what I am.
Yes.
And I'm a Catholic.
Yes.
But I'm not a Catholic writer.
Yes.
Unless it's Catholic with a small c. And then it's like, well, you know, like James Joyce said, you know, Catholic, the Catholic Church, here comes everybody.
Yes.
And, you know, so that's the thing. I'm Catholic with a small c when it comes to writing. It's like, there is nothing that is out of bounds. Nothing. because this is life.
Because this is life, yes.
In
And
all its
and
myriad
not
complexity.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And, you know, the interesting thing is that, and I have, you know, a few notes here about that, is that, I mean, it's interesting because I agree with Flannery. I mean, Flannery O'Connor said that the novelist tries to give you a total experience of human nature at any time. For this reason, the greatest dramas naturally involve the salvation or loss of the soul. Where there is no belief in the soul, there is very little drama. And so, you know, while I sort of eschew that label of, oh, I'm a Catholic novelist, I do believe that if you want to give the totality of human experience, you can't just be a materialist.
Exactly. I think you answered my question before I even asked it, which was, why does that distinction matter? And I think, to me, it seems like the label as a Catholic writer, as opposed to a writer who's been formed and informed by being a Catholic, is really the difference between perhaps a good artist and a bad one. In the same way that we can make a judgment about a Christian who has a Christian bumper sticker on their car, as opposed to the other who everything that they live and feel and do is informed by this high drama of salvation. So do I have that correct? Would you?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I mean, I like the bumper sticker metaphor because, you know, the bumper sticker is clearly trying to broadcast a message.
Right. I see. Very good. Yeah.
You know, and that's a form of sort of propaganda.
Right.
And art, whether it's religious or secular, can be propaganda.
Right.
If it sort of, you know, emphasizes the message over the life of it. Right? And the mystery of life.
Yes.
And there is mystery. And, you know, propaganda has no mystery.
Yes.
It's simply a message. Do this, do that, believe this, believe that, or else you're damned, whether in the secular sense or the religious sense.
Yes.
So it's very ironic that critics of, you know, drama with soul, if you like, totality of human drama, both the secular critics and the religious critics tend to come from the same place.
They come to the same place of ideology of the message, as opposed to the mystery of how grace operates in life.
In nature.
Nature. Yeah, I love that. I like how you wrapped it under propaganda, because I think it's easy to put out propaganda in one sense. It's not easy to create an experience, a mysterious experience, when you encounter beauty in a great work of art, in a great novel, in a great, so that's so helpful. You know, you're reminding me of, this might seem like a tangent, but I don't think it is. There's a homily by Joseph Ratzinger, an Advent homily, where he says that if you refuse to you know, kind of protect, like if you refuse to go into prayer with all the facts, even the ugly ones, that's actually not faith, but actually a form of skepticism.
Right. That's very interesting. Yes.
Interesting? And this is how he begins his Advent homilies, right?
Yes.
You know, God can take it, and if you don't think he can, then it's not really faith. And I thought in the same way with writing, when nothing's off the table, because there is enough. We don't have to hide anything. We can bring everything, because everything is part of this. Like, life is complicated, nuanced, and mysterious. So what is it that we're hiding, that we're afraid to confront? Is there?
Well, you know, people, let's leave the secularists and talk about the sort of the religious sort of pieties. You know, there's who criticize art because it's of the world.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, aside from the fact that that's Gnostic to criticize, you know, art because it's of the world.
Christian at all, but somehow we see it in certain Christian circles. Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is that sort of brings us to the question of beauty, I think. And of course, the three transcendentals, the three attributes of God is goodness, truth, and beauty. And as my husband Greg, in his Beauty Will Save the World, which is a quote from Dostoevsky, put it, that beauty is the sort of the Cinderella, you know, the forgotten sister.
Very Balthasarian of him. Right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. And interestingly, and to tie this into what you just said, quoted from Ratzinger, von Balthasar in The Glory of the Lord says about beauty, well, first of all, that beauty is disinterested. It doesn't have a kind of design on us. It doesn't propagandize.
Right.
It just is. And he says, we can be sure that whoever sneers at her name, beauty, as if she were an ornament of a bourgeois past, can no longer pray, and soon will be no longer able to love.
It's genius.
And that's amazing to me, because to link that to writing, you know, when I read people who are sort of only interested in the message, what comes across is a kind of disdain for the world, even a sort of disdain for their own characters. But on the other extreme, when I read the great novelists, Tolstoy, Virginia Woolf, Sigrid Undset, Tim Winton, Cormac McCarthy, there's this sense of just profound love for their characters and for the world. Not sentimental love, but a kind of deep humanism. And, you know, you can always tell a great writer, because Shakespeare, they have this love even for their, you know, Iagos.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
That Iago, there's one line where he says something like, you know, there was a wench in somewhere, but she died. And it's a tiny little window into perhaps his grief, which humanizes him, which makes him not a monster anymore, but a human, a deeply flawed and evil human being, but a human being nonetheless.
Amazing.
And, you know, this is the hallmark of a great writer.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, The Whiskey Priest by Graham Greene. You know,
he's on my list. You know, I've never read him. I know. I feel ashamed. I'm making a public.
Don't be ashamed. My goodness. I used to teach that every time I taught a course in literature and faith. And I would say to my students, okay, you're all going to hate this guy, this whiskey priest. Well, first of all, they were all sort of Protestants of the Protestant persuasion. So they were somewhat evangelical Protestants. They were somewhat inclined to hate Catholics anyway. And I say that because one time I was asked, are you a Christian? And I said, well, I try.
Well, you try. I like that answer. I do try.
And I also said, hey, before the Reformation, you would have been Catholic too.
I said that once to a Lutheran ex-boyfriend's family, and I got kicked under the table, Suzanne.
That's right.
My feistier years.
Oh no, history.
I know. Oh no, history. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Just rewind
but
100 years. Anyway,
but so the whiskey priest, you know, I said, you're going to hate him, and then you're going to love him like you've never loved any character in fiction before.
yeah.
And they'd look at me like, you're crazy. And we begin, and sure enough, you know, part one, they despised him. They you know, they didn't like him. They thought he was pathetic. They just, you know, and then this sort of amazing humility starts to come out of his brokenness and his self-sacrifice and his just love.
Yeah.
And by the end of it, they're like, you're right. He's wonderful. And then I receive, you know, over the years, I've received emails from students who have said, long ago, you know, who I taught 17 years ago, who said, you know, the whiskey priest is like a friend. The whiskey priest is real. I'll never forget the whiskey priest. You know, because that's because Graham Greene and other Catholic writers who are Catholics, they refuse to skip over, you know, the Last Supper and Good Friday in order to leapfrog those and go to
exactly
you know, the resurrection. And that's the big temptation for believers.
Yes.
Is, okay, I've got the goods, I've got the truth, I've got the goodness, and I'm going to go straight to message.
Yeah.
Bypassing life on the way, tragedy, the tragic sense of life, and how everything is worked out through human experience. Everything.
Which for young Christians is understandable, because in youth you are trying to really find the boundaries between good and evil. But for mature Christianity, which is kind of what we're all aiming for, and those who live, I mean, it's why my high school students hated reading Flannery O'Connor, because you couldn't quite, the message isn't as black and white as a high school student, as a child wants it to be. And so they're looking for propaganda because they think think back the faith,
because it's clear,
and it's clear, but it scares you. And I think some books maybe is reserved for after high school. But when we read Brideshead Revisited together, I said, why don't we read this? And they liked it. But I said, but you're still 17. So I want you to read it after you turn 30, and then we'll talk about it again.
Right. No, that's it. Well, but that's part of it. It's like everything is a story. I mean, the Bible is a story, a long, long story. The church is a story.
Yes.
Our lives, our individual lives are stories.
And you can't censor and delete it. Otherwise, it is a refusal to face the facts. As
well, and also, too, you can't pick and choose. You can't say this line or this chapter or this paragraph, you know, and read it out of context.
Yes.
You've got to see, I mean, if you just read the first chapter of The Power and the Glory, you'd think it was the worst, most disgusting story in the universe, right?
But you've got to go the whole path.
You've got to go on the journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're pilgrims on a journey. We're pilgrims because we're actually seeking something. We're not just wandering around, you know, in sort of randomly. We're actually looking for something. We can be lost. That's okay. Yes. As long as we're still looking.
Yes. Because it's not totally unscripted. The story is not totally unscripted.
Well, we have a sense of where we're going. It's our desire for God, but for beauty, for truth, for goodness. It's our desire for that.
Yes.
That pulls us on. But we may not, you know, know rationally what it is we're looking for. I mean, a lot of people, most people maybe in our sort of culture now, what in the West anyway, they're searching for God.
Yeah.
And they've got to kind of, this is very Augustinian, of course, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee, O Lord, is that, you know, you go from one thing to another like a child with Christmas toys.
Yes.
And when it breaks, you move on.
Right.
Right.
Thinking the next toy will
And
be somehow better and more satisfying than the last toy, but it never
well,
is.
but maybe it will. And maybe that will lead you to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And finally, you end up with something that won't break.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's our desire, you know, and so I think, you know, and that's beauty too. Beauty draws us, attracts us, you know, and we keep going, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, the beauty of art is a kind of promise of the transcendental beauty of God.
Yeah.
And it's part of him as well, because it's also nature.
Yes. And I think that,
Yeah,
it's both the promise and the participation of,
yes,
of him.
Exactly.
I think why I love beauty, I mean, that particular transcendental so much is, and I know everybody has their transcendental that they're more geared to than others. And I think that's a kind of interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But, and in fact, I don't know if you've read it, but Benedict Groeschel in his book on spiritual direction talks about how knowing the transcendental of the person you're directing is really helpful in kind of forming their spiritual life. But
yeah,
for me, beauty is always this like invitation to dialogue, and I think that's why the Balthazar quote that you read from his Glory of the Lord is so true, in that because it's not propaganda and because it's mysterious and because it seizes, it really is this invitation to prayer. And I think I don't want,
is an engagement, which
right.
is an encounter.
Yeah, it's and it really spares us of objectifying God, which I think is a huge temptation for the believer, that he's somehow a dispenser of the answers or of fulfilling all the exact particular desires, but instead it's a promise towards encountering him, and that is a mysterious experience, and that's not something that I can put into words, and it's not something that I can put pen to paper. So I think that's so beautiful. I have so much I want to ask you, Suzanne. We don't have that much time left.
Let me just, can I say one more thing, is that
please.
when we read fiction, that the intimacy that we have with that character is a sort of promise of the intimacy of communion with God. It's a kind of act of empathy and compassion and a recognition, a sort of a love.
Yeah.
You know, which is why characters become real to us and beloved of us.
Yes, that is correct. Oh, that's so beautiful. Is it too personal to ask which character is one of your dear friends? Which?
Oh gosh. Well, of course, the whiskey priest.
Yeah.
I mean, I so long to comfort him in his little prison cell, you know, when he's kind of beating himself up. Oh gosh, so many.
I know it's an impossible.
So many.
Such an impossible.
Kristen Lavren's daughter, you know, Olaf in The Master of Hesviken, Olaf, you know, many.
Well,
yeah.
I'm going to ask you to come back on the podcast so we can keep talking about this and maybe do some other fun things too. But one of our hopes at Endow is to fund a study on letter to artists. And right. I think that would be so beautiful, because even if you aren't a writer or a painter or an icon writer, or, you know, in the professional sense, John Paul II talks about that our lives are these masterpieces that ought to be crafted.
Right.
And so I just think in church culture, we really need to bring back beauty and not be such a traitor to her as a transcendental, because I think Balthazar is right on when he says that she'll come out, I can't remember the quotation, but that he'll go out, the truth and the good will be lost on us if beauty is forever.
Right. He says that she'll exact her vengeance.
Exact her vengeance, exactly. So
and
yes.
and the vengeance is, I mean, Flannery O'Connor says that if you throw beauty out of the window, literature becomes either pornography or
Oh wow.
What is it? She says, let's see if I can find it. I have the exact quote.
Oh, that would be great. Well, I love, I mean, just like literature, without beauty, literature becomes pornography. I think there's so much to even be discussed in that, in the sense that we're not here reducing beauty to aesthetics. It's not what Balthazar would say is just an ornamentation, right?
Right.
There's depth to beauty that is
right.
Not just about
yeah
that.
The other thing is, it's either sort of pornography as sort of animalism, or it's abstraction.
Yep.
Because you've gotten rid of the bread of life, right? You've just got flour or yeast. You got to put it together. To have bread.
Yes. The transcendentals all have to work together.
That's right, like the Trinity. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So what, as we wrap up this conversation, but I for sure hope that you'll say yes to many more conversations, what advice would you give to the women out there who are listening, who feel this desire to write, or are maybe writers themselves, and maybe what practical advice as a writer, or just even spiritual advice, since your faith has formed so much of your writing?
Always tell the truth in your fiction. Be true to life, whatever that is. Don't be afraid of showing suffering and tragedy and even obscenity.
Yeah.
It's life. You can't sanitize it.
Yeah, God doesn't.
He
doesn't spare us. So
no. So that's right. So I would say that for writers, I used to say to my students, with their, for them personally, but also when they were writing characters, the only question to ask is, what do you love? That's it.
That's who you are.
What do you love? And you write about what you love, but your characters, that's the key to your characters. What do they love? Find it. It may be horrifying what they love, or it may be beautiful,
Yes, I love that. So if there's any woman listening who thinks, I love writing, maybe I should pursue it.
Right.
And then I think love, I was just recently introduced, Suzanne. I know I just said we're wrapping up. I just wanted to, based off what you said, so inspirational. The Oratorians, the St. Philip Neri guys, they don't take any professional promises or vows. They are literally celibates through the bond of charity, through the bond of love. And I think, I mean, that's, wow. That's
it.
It's incredible. So with all that being said, you did mention some writers that were like touchstone writers that our women can read and just, maybe take a second look at. But I want to talk to you more. I want to talk to you about Brideshead Revisited next time. I want to talk to you about Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Faith. And I'm gonna link up if you don't mind. I should have asked you this beforehand, but I would love to link up your website and books for people to find.
Okay.
We also have male listeners
Great.
too, but also if there are any women out there that would love to reach out to you, maybe if that would be okay.
Yeah, that would be fine. Do you want me to send that to you in an email or now?
I've got all of that, so
okay, good.
I will run it all by you. But I would love for that for you to just be an inspiration to all the women who are listening. So
well, I mean, I certainly had admired many women as when I was younger, and they were an inspiration to me. So it's I'm willing.
Maybe next time we talk, if you say yes, we can talk more about Confessions of X too, because I think that Augustine's concubine, no one's ever written about her side of the story. So we can talk about that. So any last words, Suzanne, before we say goodbye?
Any last words?
Any last words?
Gosh, no. I don't think so. I mean, let's end on another quote from Flannery O'Connor.
Great.
She says, "Because I am a Catholic, I cannot afford to be less than an artist."
That's a perfect quote to end on. Thank you, Suzanne. Have a great day.
Thanks, Simone. Bye.
Bye.